Let's bring on our special guest. All right, a man who's been the Tampa Bay Buccaneers strength and conditioning coach, Nebraska football strength and conditioning coach, helped produce 21 All-Americans, more actually now at this point in time, and had about 20 players go to the NFL as first-round selections. Mr. Dave Kennedy, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Oh, life is good. I have zero complaints. All right, question for you. You watched Nebraska play so far this year. A lot of talk about, obviously, the quarterback position, but the trenches. When you watch Nebraska play, you watch them versus Michigan. The trenches starts with physicality, strength, and all that stuff. What's been your impressions of them so far at the line of scrimmage this year?
Well, I haven't watched them as much. I watched the Michigan game, and it doesn't matter. What works in middle school, works in high school, works in college, works in the NFL. Run the ball, stop the run, you win the game. I mean, and that formula always works. As much as the offenses get more sophisticated and there's more passing, it doesn't matter whether it's Alabama or Nebraska or anybody. Whoever wins, not all the time. Turnovers are a factor. Quarterback could really light it up and score 5 touchdowns. But over the long haul, it's, run the ball, stop the run, and, you win the game. So that's easy. That's the best way I can put it,
As you watch Nebraska and you watch the Michigan game, you watch the trenches and they get a bye week. What are some of the things from maybe your perspective that can be done over the bye? Because it's hard to make drastic improvements during the year, but sometimes teams come out, they look different after a bye. What are some of the things that can be done during a bye to help make quicker improvements?
Well, it's how you practice, Adam. I mean, if you want to go back to the history of Nebraska football, and I grew up in the state, and I was a student there, a GA there, and then a full-time assistant there. And if you looked at how Nebraska practiced, I mean, nobody got the number of reps at practice that they did. And when we go to a bowl game and practice on grass, if you looked at our grass and you looked at maybe Florida's grass, when we were both practicing on ours looked like you would plowed it over. It's whether it's inside period, whether it's team, it's tough. And I think what really is happening now as far as player development. I'm not talking about strength and conditioning, yes, which was my forte, but with the transfer portal and everything's trickling down to where college now is more like the NFL when you went into the NFL, and you can't practice like in the NFL like you could in college. I mean, you got all different age groups, you got experience and all that kind of stuff. But the hardening that they've gone through in college to get to the NFL pays dividends in the fundamentals, and that can't be done as much. They're paying this guy this much, and if he doesn't play, he leaves. And so that kind of development and the physicality is really tough to do, because I feel like not only strength and conditioning, but it's more like an NFL model. With the NIL and the way things are going. So, you have to practice physical to be physical. USC is getting all the gruff, and Lincoln Riley is thought of as one of the best offensive minds out there. But, it doesn't matter how many defensive coordinators they hire. They always struggle to stop the run and with their physicality. And they signed great defensive linemen this year. But, you have to practice physical to be physical. And, you have to be gap sound as much as anything. I don't know, just, and I was kind of flipping. But when if you get gashed, that's, I don't know what the stats would have been. They fall into the stats, but they had 3, monster runs. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I kind of went rambling on there, but that's kind of what I think.
No, I think that makes sense. Some of the more physical players you've been around some of the best to ever do it. Your time at Ohio State, Orlando Pace, number 1 overall pick. You've been, I believe you crossed over with Sue at the Bucks. I could be wrong about that, but I know Levante.
No, I did not. But I had Sue. We redshirted Sue. You were there. I mean,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
I fought that one. I like even back then. Like we redshirted Sean Springs when I was at Ohio State, and he ended up being the number 1 pick, and Sue was Sue, and Dan Wilkinson, we redshirt, and if they're that good, they're going to come out early. So you just lose that experience, but we're running ISO with Orlando Pace and Corey Stringer on the same line, and I think you got to practice physical to be physical. You got to practice tackling the tackle, and that means going, it's tough to do when you're worried about getting this guy who's, getting guys hurt, which is never a thing, so it's really how you practice. And I don't know how they're practicing. I'm not judging them. That was just one game. I think, how do you feel about Michigan State? Are they a physical run team?
They're a big they're a big team. They got some big lines, some big players. I mean, they're a Big Ten team. Their quarterback is really athletic. He can throw, he can run. He was a former 5-star player. So they've got some things they can do. Their talent is not to the level of Nebraska. Maybe they have a little bit of a size advantage just because we're a little smaller on the D-line. Where I was going with my question, though, I mean, you mentioned Sean Springs, Orlando Pace, Joey Galloway, who played for about 1,000 years in the league. Larry Fitzgerald, he actually trained, as you know, at Nebraska under you when he was getting ready for the draft, one of the most physical wide receivers ever. Levante David, I know you had him at the Bucs. Talk to me about the guys who were physical, the guys who were extra physical. What do you think made them that way? Like from their mental approach?
Well, okay, so I don't think the game of football is in everybody. I mean, it's not in them. Like I have 3 sons, and they're all different. They're all raised the same way, and it's certain guys could make it pretty far in college and even make it to the NFL and not even like the physicality of the game just because it's so freakishly big or just so talented, and that'll eventually show up. So yeah, the game of football is not in everybody, just like UFC or boxing or those kind of things, because it is, and the difference between the NFL and college from a physicality standpoint is shocking, and that was my learning. I watched it and I had all these players come back and all that kind of stuff. But when I came up here and, I had Mike Evans in college and then we had Mike Evans here, and he's huge. And he could manhandle corners. I mean, you could not press him because he would just throw you like a little rat because he's giant, but he came after that first game. We played the Bengals his first game, and he walked in like Frankenstein, walking into the facility. And I couldn't even believe it because he's bigger than all those, but it's still the physicality, the toll of that, got on him. And the real little guys get tired and big guys don't shrink. That holds up. And if you look at, okay, my sons went to Texas, and so my wife acts like we went to Texas. So Texas game is always going to be on. And with the NIL and stuff, Texas went from having just a regular Big 12, defensive line. Now they're as big as anybody, and when Alabama was great, they're 8 deep on their defensive front. And the thing that NIL has also changed is that, like, Georgia and Alabama used to have 8 defensive linemen that are all 4 or 5 stars that they're running in and out, and they're just dominant. Well, now they only have 3 or 4, because if you ain't playing, you're getting out of there and going somewhere else. So it kind of evens it out in a way, and that's why Alabama won't be as dominant, Georgia won't be as dominant. So I think the game of football is not in everybody, but size wins. Little guys get tired and big guys, little guys get tired and big guys don't shrink.
The instant you said that the Texas game is on every single weekend in your house, I think half our listeners probably turned off the interview, but that's okay. For those that are still there, I've actually shared this story before, but I'll quickly share it again. It was my redshirt freshman year, my first spring practice, and a lot of my friends were going out boating on a lake. It's springtime. It's Saturday. So I'm about to embark on a 1,000-play scrimmage, and I'm a redshirt freshman, going to go against a lot of the starters, Richie, guys like that. And I'm in warm-up lines, and I'm a pretty easy person to read sometimes. I did not have the best attitude, but I did not realize, like, my helmet was on, my face mask and everything. I did not realize I was that easy to read because I'm standing there doing whatever stretch, and you walk up and you're just staring at me. You don't say anything for a solid 10, 15 seconds, which isn't long, but it feels like an eternity when you're a freshman who's basically pouting and you got your strength coach just staring a hole through you. You look at me and you must have been able to figure out kind of where I was at mentally. And you look at me and you just simply go, football ain't for everybody. And you walked away. So with what you just said to me, I was brought back to that moment in time. And I don't know if I've ever told you this. I remember that obviously to this day, but it stuck with me. Like, this ain't for everybody. Either buy in or get out, Adam. And that was honestly a big moment for me going forward. But I got another question for you. And again, I think Corey Campbell, our strength coach, does a great job. But from a strength and conditioning perspective, what kind of role does that actually play when it comes to being physical at the line of scrimmage?
Well, confidence. I mean, you know, like, yeah, the stronger you are, you know, whether you're a 5-star, 4-star, 3, you know, player development is huge, and people mature at different times at different ages. You know, there's all kinds of the history of Nebraska walk-ons and linemen that have just developed. That is 100% the way to go. Now in the season, no. Once you're in it, no. That's a huge part. Player development is a huge part. And Adam, I'm really kind of scared that is not a part of it anymore. Where and I'm not judging any strength coaches in college. You don't have 6 a.m. for 2 weeks in the middle of the winter. I mean, with that and that kind of stuff. And you know, if you pay a certain lineman, you know, that guy's going to play. If you pay a certain quarterback, that guy's going to play. So if you pick the wrong guy, then you're kind of stuck. But player development is huge. And you know, from a player perspective too, you know, with the NIL, they've got a certain amount of money, or they were 4-star, and that ranking is still, you know, carries way too much weight. I mean, it's like winning or losing a bowl game based on your recruiting class, 5-star and then 4-star and things like that. But if you're a 4-star and you don't play, then you aren't trying to develop. You just say, I'm going somewhere else. I mean, I'm getting screwed. And you know, with social media and everything, you got to deal with your family. They're saying, hey, what's going on? What's the problem? How come you're not playing? You got all these hype going in. You're getting a certain amount of money. And then it's a lot on them mentally. You know, it really is because not only do they have to deal with, hey, they're not good enough to be playing right now, but they also have to answer these questions. Well, you should be playing, and all that kind of stuff, which just makes it exponentially harder for everybody who's trying to coach him. You know, but the number one thing, you know, and this, I'm getting down on philosophy of coaching and stuff. If it's gonna everybody wants to get better, and if it's gonna make them better, if they know, you know, that they're gonna get better by doing it, they'll do anything. All the other things I just said are completely true. But the greatest motivator is you know, the success of the program, because and if they know that your best interest is their best interest, not trying to impress the head coach, not trying to get the next job, not trying to do this or change when the head coach comes around, they'll do anything for you. So you know, if they have the ability to go really hard in the off season and things like that, but player development still should be paramount. And do you go to practice? Do they go hard on the inside? I mean, on open day, is there a scrimmage? If there was open week when Coach Osborne was there, you'd scrimmage on Wednesday and Saturday. I mean, so like, you know, with the numbers the way they are now and things like that, nobody does that. But like I said, that drifts down from, you know, it's more like an NFL kind of, you know, how many times you go in pads during the whole season in the NFL. So if that trickles down, then the fundamentals are lost on that.
I mean, that's a great point. College football is more like the NFL than it's ever been. It's getting more like that. It's funny you brought up the 6 a.m. workouts. I still remember the 2 weeks of hell from Callahan when he first got there. Our workout started at 6. You had to be taped, which meant, God, 150 plus guys at that point getting taped. Like, you had to get up at 4:15 to be ready to go at 6. And I'm still convinced to this day, you guys pretty much tried to get as many guys to quit as you possibly could because he didn't like the size of the roster. But again, those were workouts. They weren't for everybody. But hey, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time, and it's good to hear from you as always.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And now that you've cut me off, I could bring up the Richie Incognito Adam Carriker fight.
Oh boy,
that nobody talks about, but it was really kind of pretty much the last straw for Richie. You know, but and that was something to see, and that was one of those things where everybody knows when they can jump into certain fights and break it up because there's nobody's really going to do anything. But that was that's something you didn't want to jump right in the middle of that one. So I'll leave you on that, and you guys have a great day.
Well, real quick, since you brought it up, what was your perspective on that? Because I haven't talked about that thing in years, but what was your perspective on it?
Well, Coach Callahan was super against fighting because he went through all that. Romanowski broke a player's jaw on the line, and it kind of separated the team. So, and Richie wanted to fight all the time, every time, and he would absolutely punk you if you if he could, and that was his. He loved to do that. And so there's no problem with that. That's great. I mean, if a guy tries to punk you and you let him, then you're just a punk. So it doesn't matter, Richie's reputation or anything like that. And really, fights in full pads. There's really, I mean, you two are giant dudes anyway. There's not a real threat of other than breaking your hand swinging to somebody's helmet or something, So yeah, no, I have no problem with it. I thought, and it was a kind of a come out that was before you were world famous, and so it was kind of it really was. It was a coming out party for Adam Carriker.
So from my perspective, I think it was going into my sophomore year, so I hadn't started yet. It was a goal line scrimmage, and Richie had moved from tackle to center. No
question. Yeah. I know right where it is.
Yeah, it was in the north end zone. Richie had gone to center. Lakeven Smith was out that day. So Kaz looked at me and said, "You go to nose," which meant I went against Richie, which I had done 1,000,000 times my first 2 years there, so no big deal. I'd seen him get in 1,000,000 fights. And I've always said I kind of respected him because he would fight you if you were a DB, if you were a lineman, if you were a big name, if you were no name. I saw him try to fight all 4 starting defensive linemen at once and not back down when I was redshirting. I couldn't believe what I was watching. So I actually respected him. Didn't love everything about it, but I respected it. And I'm like, how in the world, with all the times I've gone against Richie, has he not swung on me yet? At some point, he's going to. He did. I had a game plan, and the rest is history. So, yeah.
That's good. Well, that's where you come out. And here's the thing. Once you go there with a guy, he won't go there anymore. I mean, once you've had that, he's just going to see what if he could punk you, then, and that happens in NFL games all the time. Guys make guys quit. I mean, it's kind of easy to, and I'm talking too much. I mean, you got to go to your next session. But like there's all different forms of quitting.
Yep.
I mean, it's obvious, certain times, but you could stay on a block to not be in the play if you're worried about trying to tackle Barry Sanders or a great back or whoever it is, and especially on the fronts, you've been there where especially if you could take a defensive lineman will just kind of shut down. If a guy he knows he can't get anywhere, and that's just another form of quitting. So and also you could really get in offensive lineman's head where he can't even function. And it's amazing. I didn't think about it. For your length and where you end up playing, to play nose, that's a tribute. I mean, just to even go in there. I mean, you aren't built like a nose. I mean, that's really that kind of length and your levers. I mean, that's really not conducive to playing nose. But that was a coming out party, man.
Yeah, as a sophomore, I was 270 when he told me to go play nose by. There was literally for one practice. It wasn't a big deal. Actually, my highlight of that whole thing was Barrett Ruud coming up to me afterwards, and he goes, "I'm so happy you did that," and he just walked away. Anyways, I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for joining me.